Washington has landed the first top 100 recruit of the Jedd Fisch era.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen to the day. And Lars, hey, shout out to all the everydayers that we've seen come up to us for the first couple of open practices. Just say what's up. Just say, hey, big fan, listen to the show. We appreciate it. It means a lot to us, truly. So if you see us out there, feel free to say what's up. It does really mean a lot to us as we've tried to just grow this show as much as we can. We haven't even hit a year of episodes yet. So that it's really cool to see how all that has been going on. And Lars, speaking of just big things going on, Washington has landed the first top 100 recruit of the Jedd Fisch era, landing running back Ansu Sanoe out of Lake Oswego High School in Lake Ridge, Oregon. He is the number one player in the state of Oregon in the class of 2026 and is also the number 98 player in the country, according to 247 Sports. And if you turn on this kid's film, oh man, can this dude move for his size?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, we kind of talked about, where can Jedd Fisch get those truly dynamic difference makers, right? And certainly at a position like running back. And honestly, I think you can kind of use him almost in a variety of ways, right? I mean, again, Traditionally he's going to be a running back, but I think just with his kind of, it's not even a quick burst. It's even like Audric Harris, but like to another level, where it's like you just instantly, like, you can just know that's the guy right there. It doesn't take more than one play to realize how quickly he can make an impact. And so getting a kid like that, not only from the state of Oregon, but a kid that Oregon wanted, and as a top 100, like, not just like, that's already one big win. Getting a top 100 player, that's what Jedd Fisch needed to do, and he's already getting that started in the 26 class.
So I'm going to caveat this real fast. We know he's a 2026 player. We know there's a whole long way to go until signing day, but that doesn't mean that it's not a really big momentum shift for this coaching staff, which has been saying since the day they got here. So just since the first day they got here, hey, we want to bring in a lot of big recruits. We want to make sure that we are able to go get these guys. And you talk about Oregon, he had Oregon State crystal balls for a while. So Oregon was certainly in the mix. They did offer, but some of the other really big name schools to offer early that he decided to choose Washington over: Georgia, Miami, Tennessee, Texas A&M. Those are all, because he only had 13 offers, but you look up and down that sheet and it's, these are some big time offers. And I talked about his movement on film, where you said Audric Harris, and I know what you mean by that comparison, but I want to just make sure, because that we caveat it, where he's 6'1", 210. And this dude moves so incredibly well for his size. He's so strong. I was texting with friend of the show, our good buddy Ben Glassmeyer, who wrote a fantastic piece about him over on Huskies Wire. And he was just like, just watching this kid move is electric. It's different because he sticks his foot in the ground and he just goes and he does all this. And he looks like, I don't know how much he's going to physically mature as he continues to, we talked a lot about body types on yesterday's show after the first big practice. And obviously we'll be getting to the second one here very shortly. But I just look at him and I say, okay, I don't know if this is somebody where you talk about Audric Harris, we talk about Jason Robinson at wide receiver. You look at those guys and you say, okay, their frames, their bodies have a long way to go to fill out. Where that's not necessarily the case here, but if he can continue to just refine playing running back, and he's already got really nice feet. He already knows how to just make moves in space, and at his size, he's already going to be really tough to bring down. And if all of those things can just continue to improve, he looks like a guy who could play a lot as a freshman.
Exactly. And I think we had this conversation at practice where sometimes there's a concern about, has he maxed out his capacity? Is he already over the top?
Yeah.
I think the one thing that we really doesn't get discussed when talking about players like that, they're used to playing at that weight. So when they come in as a freshman and as a sophomore and as a junior, their weight doesn't change. They might, if anything, add, maybe 5 or 10 pounds, or gain 5 pounds of muscle and trim down 5 pounds of quote unquote fat. So they're relatively staying the same and changing their body in a slight way. Having that not having that learning curve in terms for your body, right? Because most kids we talk about, right? You need, okay, he's going to be great, but he's got to add some muscle to his frame, right? He's going to be able to handle the physicality no matter what position they're playing. Being able to come into college as a freshman and sophomore and say, hey, you know, I've already been at this weight, I'm comfortable. I don't really, I mean, again, we're talking about fine tuning at this point. That's something, that's why I think, aside from, again, what he does on the field, just having that element will actually help him break into as a freshman, because he's already kind of used to playing it that way. He doesn't have to, quote unquote, oh, he's got to get up to, you know, maybe 190, 190. It's like, no, he's already well past that. Like, that's the point. Like think about Tybo Rogers, for example. A better example is Audric Harris, where it's like, hey, you can kind of see the burst in Tybo, but he's got to get a little bit bigger so he can handle breaking tackles and things like that. It's like, he's already almost near Jonah Coleman, and he's not even in college yet.
Right. That's a really great point. So let's spend a couple minutes here, talk about the momentum, talk about where this is going, because, you know, we know that Mark Hennecore, 4-star linebacker from Narbonne in California, 4-star linebacker Zadrius Rainey Sale were both on unofficial visits today as we record this on Thursday evening at Washington to watch spring practice. And those are two guys that are really high on Washington's list for getting in the door in the 2025 class. They want to make sure, you know, especially Rainey Sale, who's the number one player in the state of Washington, and it's just a really, really impressive athlete on film. The more, you know, they can build that momentum for just recruiting in general, it needs to carry over to 2025 now. You need to make sure you can lock guys like that down. And then, you know, we talked about these guys. We're talking about these guys for weeks now at this point, where, you know, whether it be you can find a way to get a Dijon Lee in the door and Anquan Fagans. I know Matai Tagoa went to USC a couple of days ago, where, you know, we'll see if he still ends up taking his official visits, what that might look like. But it just needs to find a way to carry over. Like getting a visit from Andrew Marsh is such a huge thing. The top 60 receiver out of Texas, who is just unbelievable on film as well. It's just about stacking those kinds of classes and stacking those kinds of recruits where, you know, Sanoe is a younger guy, but there's still going to be people who look to that and just say, oh yeah, if he wants to go to Washington, hey, and maybe I'll give him a closer look. Maybe, you know, I'm going to maybe take an official visit now as a 26 kid. You look at some of the 25 kids that already are on official visits, and it's just, okay, yeah, there's going to be this movement coming to Montlake. And now it's just a matter of actually securing those commitments. And then, of course, after that, holding true until signing day. But it seems like this coaching staff is going to be pretty good at that.
Exactly. And I mean, you nailed it right on the head, where it's more so for like Zadrius Rainey Sale, right? Where he sees the kid from Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. Dimitri Manning was also out of practice again. I don't believe he's been offered by the new staff at Washington. So again, maybe that could be, it's a good kind of positive momentum sign in that regard. But when you start seeing some of these local kids in the region want to stay home and play for Jedd Fisch, no, it doesn't matter what class, you start to, that kind of helps your thought process of, hey, you know what? Okay, if somebody else is thinking about it, maybe let me take another look at it, or let me kind of just ponder it. It's never going to be like, oh, hey, because he committed, I decided to commit. Sometimes that's the case, but I don't think that's the case in this situation. But I do think it's the former, where Zadrius Rainey Sale obviously had liked Washington, just again, more so William Inge and the staff and things like that. But obviously being a hometown kid, he talked about it, you know, as going into his junior year, where it's, hey, you know, I know what that means. You know, Miles Gaskin, all these other guys that stayed home, that means something, right? So with this new staff, can they carry those relationships over? And one thing we talked about, bringing it kind of full circle with the linebacker class that you mentioned with Mark Hennecore and Zadrius Rainey Sale, one of those, if you think about it, if Mark Hennecore decides to commit, let's say within the next month or so, or even before he gets up on his official visit, that's one of those where then if you're Zadrius Rainey Sale, you're thinking, oh, I met that guy on campus when we kind of talked about what it'd be like to play, you know, possibly together or things like that. I'm not saying they had that conversation, but again, you know, 18 to 20, you know, 17, 18-year-old kids are going to have those conversations. So all that comes to from having those relationships, getting those guys in and getting the boat going early. And no matter what class it is, so that lays the foundation. Once you see kids buy in, great people want to follow great people, great players want to play with great players. You see that across the country.
No, you're absolutely right. And Lars, with that being said, we got to see so much more on the field today on day 2. Let's get into it. right after a message from our friends over at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. You can get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info, claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. And Lars, you know, when we give shout outs to anybody on the recruiting trail, you know, we got to give a shout out to the best people in the business over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has a tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Lars, we saw a lot on the field on day two. Is there anyone in particular you want to start?
Yeah, so there was a lot that we can, I mean, again, it kind of carried over from day one, but one thing that really kind of we got to see up close and personal, Jonah Coleman. I asked you this question on the sideline. Who has the bigger tree trunk, Jonah Coleman or Javon Parker? Those thighs, like,
so I have
I said Michael.
Second. I have to stop you for 1 second. I'm sorry. This is the only podcast in the world where you're going to get 2 days worth of Jonah Coleman thigh talk. I love it. I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, but just because we got to see it a little bit, but again, it's one of those where all the drills that you kind of see during practice, and again, it was a rainy day or slightly overcast rainy day, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't downpouring, so obviously they were still outside in Husky Stadium, but all those drills that they do, you can see why Jonah Coleman is so difficult to tackle, and we saw it during the scrimmages where it's like, whoa, wait a minute. That guy actually does have that quickness that you wouldn't think he would have. You would think he's kind of the running back where he's going to truck a couple of guys. His size might slow him down a bit. No, not at all. Not even the slightest. And so I think because one thing as we were watching the scrimmages, again, it's day two. Will Rogers was 7-7 on one drive. So, got to keep it kosher on some level. That's not necessarily going to be reality. But every time when Jonah Coleman did get a carry, you can see why he's quickly being established as running back one. No disrespect to Cam Davis, who's looking like he's fully rebounded from his lower leg injury last season. Yeah, and so as Nick Saban would say, lower body injury. But because when you look at the rest of that running back room, no matter who the quarterback is, whether Damon or DeMarcy has beat out Will or whatever the case may be, the running backs are going to have to play a big role. And so I think there's certainly enough talent in that room. And with the addition of Jonah Coleman, I think that him and Cam Davis, I know we talked about a little bit yesterday, but I mean, I think that's the more we see this offense, the more I think the running backs are going to have to obviously play a significant role. Maybe not as much as they did this season because it was basically Dylan Johnson and
Dylan Johnson and also Dylan Johnson.
Right, with an occasional appearance by Tybo Rogers in the third quarter.
And Will Mixon. Yeah. So I like where you're going with that. And because another guy that I pointed out to you as, like, speaking of Tybo Rogers, that we kind of talked about in a similar light with being slightly under recruited but just still looking very physically talented, is Adam Muhammad, where we had a whole just segment on body types yesterday. It was fantastic. I loved every second of it because that's just so much of what college football is. And Adam Muhammad just kind of has that same body type where it's like, oh, this dude like really looks like he's going to turn into something. And I remember one of the things I was saying to you was, I can't believe this guy was as under-recruited as he was, just being as productive as he was in high school. Yeah, he's running behind a couple of then Arizona commits and now one Washington signee and Michael Watkins. But When I look at him, I see the burst. I see the possibility to add strength. I see how they might be able to use him as a pass catcher. And it's all really exciting to think about, where you and I were saying, well, he's certainly going to redshirt this year, just with all the other traffic in the room, everything else that's around him. We're not going to see a whole lot of him, but I like the promise that's there. And we're going to see guys move on from the running back room at some point, whether it be spring, whether it be fall. They're certainly going to be guys who are graduating and just leaving the program after this year. So there's going to be an opportunity for him. And I'm just really excited to see whenever he might get it, just because he looks like he's as physically talented as anybody in that room.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that's kind of the key factor there, is there's a number of different body types, right? Both short and long term when you look at the room. Because again, you want kind of almost an eclectic mix of running backs, right? Just shout out to Brendan Carroll for appreciating my lexicon and using a hallmark
that was great
to describe the offensive line. But it's kind of similar. Like, what's the hallmark? What's the highlight? What is the brand of the running back room? And by the way, shout out to Scotty Graham for just repping the Slick Watts headband. He wore.
Oh, dude, it's such an elite look. I love it so much.
But one thing I did also notice is with each running back, he says something a little different, right? Where he's always giving coaching, right? Even in those drills and everything, but it's tailored to the player, which I think is important because it makes perfect sense for who Scotty Graham is, just as a relationship builder. And we see that on the recruiting trail, right? Why does you don't pull out a top 100 kid without having the running backs coach playing a significant role, right? So clearly it's also another feather in the cap for Scotty Graham to get such a key commit early on. I know he's not going to publicly talk about that because he can't. Shout out to the NCAA. But with that being said, it's that type, seeing those different types. Again, we had the discussion. Adam Muhammad probably plays 2-3 games this season. But one other position that I think we also got to see a little bit more of today was the quarterbacks, right? Because they scrimmaged a little bit on Wednesday.
Some more 7-on-7s.
Yeah, but one thing that really did show true was here's one thing I did notice. Every single receiver, whether it's Jeremiah Hunter, Giles Jackson, Denzel Boston, Rashid Williams, who's playing a lot with the ones right now. Again, I've always kind of envisioned he was going to be the cream of the crop of that class. Tayshaun Lyons transferred out. Rashid is certainly up to the task. And you saw that today where he lined up against Ephesians Price out a number of times. And the one thing I noticed, it's almost like the Roma Dunze effect, but flipped, right? Where going back to the Trent McDuffie days, every single receiver wants to go against Trent because you're testing yourself against the best. Every DB wants to cover Rome because, well, we know who Rome, and that's no slight to Jalen and everybody else that was in that room. But there's a different breed of player, and that
there's a reason Rome's going in the top 10.
Exactly. And again, that's not to say Ephesians Price Sox going to be a top 10 pick, but certainly.
And there's a reason Trent McDuffie's a first team All-Pro. Like that's a very valid point. So I'm really glad you said that. And I'm going to get to him more in a minute because I need some time to talk about my Denzel Boston agenda, but I want to do that after the break because before I want to touch on your point of the quarterbacks. And I just want to talk about Damon Williams because you and I were having a really fun conversation just talking about his ability out of structure and his ability out of the pocket. And one thing that we did see at times today during the 11-on-11 period were the offensive line struggles that we knew were going to happen at some point this spring. And we still stand by our take that by the end of the spring, the offensive line is going to look a lot better. It's going to look a lot different. Brendan Carroll said as much today, said he's hoping to get 5 or 6 scholarship offensive linemen in by the end of the spring portal. So we'll see what that looks like. But I was just so impressed with Damon where he's clearly learning a whole lot of new things when it comes to just taking snaps under center, when it comes to learning the college offense, when it comes to just everything around that. And he's not only is he taking it in stride, but when he's asked to do things behind a bandaged patchwork offensive line, he's doing a very, very good job of moving, of getting out of the pocket, of standing in the pocket as long as he possibly needs to sometimes, but still, and keeping his eyes downfield when, he goes to roll and he needs to make a throw or he needs to just escape and do something else. And it was all really, really impressive. And, we heard Jedd Fisch rave about him on signing day. We heard him rave about him at the luncheon last week. We heard him rave about him after day 1 of practice. And just now that, like as he called day 1, a day of teaching, where now on day 2, where it was just a significant jump in terms of what quarterbacks were being asked to do. you could really see why they were so high on this kid.
Exactly. And it's kind of it's what you want as a coach, right? You want to see what you saw in the recruiting process where, again, he went one of the highly more talented quarterbacks in the state of Arizona. Just
number one player in the state of Arizona.
No, I'm saying not just for his class, but just kind of in recent memory, right? And that's a rather significant take. But it's the lights aren't too big for him. And, they're kind of it's one of those things where I mentioned it to you where he had the quote-unquote miss to Giles Jackson, but Michael Penix S, where it's if you're going to miss over and out of bounds, don't miss short, don't make the wrong read, don't hurt the team. And I think, again, it's no surprise because that's exactly what they saw at Bassett, right? That's what Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty saw up close and personal in the state of Arizona. So I think they knew exactly what they were getting.
You're absolutely right. So, Lars, time to get into my Denzel Boston agenda. Right after a message from our friends over at GameTime, because GameTime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier because prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And shout out to GameTime for just, being a fantastic app to use the entire weekend, as I just spent way too much time at T-Mobile Park watching my Red Sox be happily mediocre against the happily mediocre Mariners. So, that's a whole other discussion we don't need to get into, but it was just so fantastic to be able to watch baseball, do all that sort of thing. And I just love GameTime because there's so many ways to save money on tickets. Flash deals are really cool because you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, and zone deals, which save you even more when you choose a section and let GameTime choose the seats. And their lowest price guarantee is awesome. And if you find lower prices somewhere else, GameTime will credit you with 110% of the difference. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Lars, I misspoke, and I apologize. It's not my Denzel Boston agenda. It's our Denzel Boston agenda. But I want to take a moment to talk about the play of the day, because Denzel had the play of the day in the final team scrimmage period, which, by the way, when they play Sandstorm to get that going, it just is awesome. And I gave my Red Sox shout out. I won't talk about Koji Uehara, but that was just an electric factory in and of itself. But Denzel Boston, they throw him a fade ball. It was very clear, just scripted what plays they were running on 6, 7, 8 plays, whatever it was down the field. And the last play was a fade ball from the 5-yard line. And it was Denzel Boston versus Ephesians Prysock. And both guys went full extension, and Denzel's able to make the grab over him. The only touchdown scored on the day, even though, again, there weren't very many scrimmage periods and there's no pad, so it is what it is. But it was an electric, just a fantastic catch. And it spoke to your point of your tweet the other day where you said that Denzel Boston you wouldn't be surprised if he leads the team in receiving yards this year. And I 100% agree with you. The safe bet is Jeremiah Hunter. That's absolutely certain. But Denzel, it's something that you and I, we're going to go back to when this show first started. And we were talking about him last fall when, we were talking about him more than we were Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, because we knew what we were going to get in those guys. We knew what we were going to see, and we saw exactly that. And Denzel was the guy who needed to make a name for himself and was going out there making fantastic, just acrobatic catches down the field, going up and over guys, just burning guys on deep balls. And he's starting to do that again. And I'm sure we're going to see more of that as spring practice goes along. And this just kind of feels like that first step for him where, if there's any one player on the field that's taller than Denzel Boston, it's Ephesians Prysock. And he did a fantastic job of going full extension, making sure he was able to make that catch. And it's exciting to see because there's obviously going to be a drop off from the big three that we just mentioned, but I don't really think it's going to be as big as we think it is.
No, and I think that's kind of the whole point, right? Where again, that trio is never before, never again sort of thing, right? Especially the fact that they were all there at the same time. It wasn't like, hey, Jalen Polk was the first one, and then Jalen McMillan followed, and then Rome Odunze was the, kind of the Marvin Harrison, right, if you will, right, of the Ohio State trio, right? You got Chris Olave, down the line. This is something different though, where Denzel Boston kind of has that chance to almost make it his own thing, right? Because again, he came from Emerald Ridge, was one of the very few players that Kalen DeBoer took in that first class. Jamarcus Shepard publicly has stated he didn't even know really of him or kind of watch his film or anything. We had to go to Emerald Ridge, get to know the kid. But then once again, obviously goes without saying, once you got to meet Denzel, knew initially, this is a guy I can easily work with, no doubt. And we saw that, right? We saw Shepard really kind of take a kin to him early on, even though he knew he wasn't going to play because of the guys playing above him. And there's no. I mean, Charles Jackson ended up being a casualty in that regard as well, right? Where because of those three, some other highly touted players had to take a significant backseat, not just a slight backseat, a significant, we're getting you on the next trip backseat, not just, hey, sit in the back.
Right. And and I mean, we can't even forget Sherman Bernard in that conversation as well, where it just, to your point even more, you're absolutely right there. So I feel like, I know we mentioned it very briefly. We kind of need to talk about line play. And because we got to talk to Brendan Carroll today, we talked to Drew Party, we talked to Zach Henning, and I feel like there are still some promising things happening on the line. And we're going to see what happens, of course, over the rest of camp with the transfer portal, which opens on the 15th, and then into fall. But there were times today where I just, I wasn't necessarily really concerned with the overall just play of the line, where we knew what was going to happen at points in time, where we knew things were going to collapse when, and I don't mean this is slight to any of them, when there are three walk-ons that are lining up against Javon Parker, Sebastian Valdez, and Zach Durfee. We know what's going to happen. We know that's, and again, I don't mean this in any derogatory way. We know what's going to happen, or what it's going to look like when the season comes around. We know who's probably going to be playing at that point. And I don't know where I want to start, because there's so many guys that I really like. I think I'll leave the big name to you and Paki Finau, because I want to talk about Sione Fasolo, where that's a guy where they've had him line up at left tackle, at right tackle, and he reminds me a lot of Julius Buelow in the way of his frame and his size and everything that it looks like he can be. And I'm just really excited to see his continuing development, because I don't think he's ready to play yet. I think he needs to add more weight and continue to work on his technique a little bit. But I think by next season that he's somebody who could take a big step forward.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good one as well, because again, it's kind of same, almost in a similar mold to Paki Finau, right? Where again, you don't expect them to play 3-4 games this year, right? Again, sure. You expect, especially early on in those out of conference games, you're probably getting at least, that third, fourth quarter action for some of those freshmen, especially with the way Jedd Fisch has spoken about the freshmen, because once you get into Big Ten play, you're leaning on your veterans and things like that. But to your point, kind of in a similar mode about Paki Finau, where what's the name that I kind of gave to you, which again is when I say, he's Roman Nuzzi-esque, Michael Penix-esque, we're not saying they're 1A, 1B. We're saying, hey, that's a similar thing that Mike did, where, some of that, where Paki looks a lot like Troy Finau.
Troy Fautano.
Or Troy Fautano. What did I say?
You said Troy Finau, which I mean, hey, you're on the right track there. So, but
because I think the only position I haven't seen him line up at is center. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's kind of Brendan Carroll speaking to Paki Finau, saying, hey, I believe you can play anywhere. I think you're probably best suited as a guard. You could play tackle. I think that could work out, but I think especially early on in his career, almost like Jackson Kirkland, right, where get in on the guard side. And then if we need you to kick out, you can easily kick out because you have the ability to play tackle. And we know that. We just need you at guard for the time being.
It's also, playing guard is also it's not easy, but it's an easy way to get the feel of what you're going to experience at tackle, where obviously it's different. There are a lot of different things you're asked to do, but you're able to just kind of get used to the physicality. And it was something where when we saw Jackson do that as a redshirt freshman, once he did kick out to tackle, he didn't seem overwhelmed by anything. And I feel like, because obviously it's different for everybody, but it's just a development path that I really like, because I know they asked Lincoln Kennedy to do that way back in the day. And there are a whole lot of other examples you can point to just kind of around college football of, oh yeah, this guard was our left guard. This guy's our left guard. We're going to kick him out to left tackle now. And I just like that development path, because, you kind of have help on both sides. You're asked to do a lot of different things. And then once you get to the point or where you're ready to play tackle, which is kind of what, you and I were looking at when it came to guys like Nate Kalepo and Julius Buelow and what that might have looked like this upcoming year. We were just really curious how that was going to go. But, when we look at just what path he's going to take, I just really like him at guard because of his athleticism and because of his speed and because of his ability to just what he can do in the same vein as Michael Watkins when he gets out in front of a play and he's just a freight train that you really just want to get out of the way of. And as Paki continues to add weight and add strength, I feel that he's going to end up in that exact same mold.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's when you think about how these players impact this team and what they can do offensively, if you know how to pull as a guard and move like a freight train already, when you kick out to tackle, you're now leading that charge, right? Whether you're pulling or you're even stretching, that allows the run game and even the pass game to an extent, but more so the run game to do more, to get more creative. And I think that, and not just creative, but be more efficient as well, right? Where, again, if you're able to dominate and kind of spread the ball out and have a tackle on a linebacker, you're already ahead of the game. So I think it kind of speaks to what Jedd Fisch and Brendan Carroll want to do offensively, where, hey, we know it's about the quarterback, but it's really about the offensive line. Again, shout out Jim Harbaugh for the quote, the only group that relies on themselves is the offensive line. They set the tone. And so I think having Paki Finau, again, it's a long-term plan, right? You're not expecting Paki Finau to be your starting left guard. But the fact that they have him in those situations to learn and get that experience already early in spring ball, it's just a sign of things to come for him down the road.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Hope to see some of you out there on Saturday during the Opens practice. And, until then, just make sure you keep yourself subscribed and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And again, please make sure to subscribe. Make sure to comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.